crafters, and welcome back. My name is Deepa from DeeZinesByD, and today I have a Scrappy Tales post for you. So I have three cards that I'm sharing today that have beautiful ink blended backgrounds using oxide inks, and then I'm using some silhouette die cuts and a bit of drawing to create these Halloween cards. So let's look at the products we're going to be using. I'm mainly going to be using the Halloween Animals die set. And this came out with the last release, not the most recent one, but the last one. And then I'm also going to be using the stamp set, which has all of these useful sentiments for Halloween. So the first thing you're going to want is a masking paper. So I have this Inka Dinka Doo stamp masking paper. You can use any type of masking paper. And then I'm going to take a circle die. So I'm using the Pink Fresh Studios Folk Edge circles, and they have circle dies that are just a plain circle in this set. So I thought this would work perfectly to cut out my circle mask. So all I'm doing is placing that circle on top of the masking paper and cutting it out with my Sizzix sidekick here. And I've cut two of these for the first two cards, and then I'm going to use a larger one for the final one. And I'm just going to place it on my A2 sized white card panel here. And what I'm showing you is for this card, I'm going to use the wolf. So I'm just making sure that the wolf fits nicely in the center there. That die cut mask is actually going to be, it's going to end up being our moon. So that's why we've kind of masked it off here to create the actual colorful inky background, which would be the sky. And then once I pull that mask off, we're going to end up adding ink to it to make it look like the moon. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and I've started adding some ink to the panel here. I started off with some abandoned coral at the bottom, and I've taken up a large part of the bottom. You can see that's because part of that bottom is going to have a black die cut or a black panel, which is going to end up being the ground that the wolf is going to sit upon. And then after the abandoned coral, I added some dusty concord. Then I'm coming in with some stormy sky. Then I'll start adding darker colors like chip sapphire. And then finally, I will finish off with black soot. And that creates the darkest portion of the sky. And then I'll also take the black soot and kind of spread it around or blend it around the edges just to darken the rest of the sky and make it look more like a darkened night sky. Now you can see as I go from one color to the next, I'm going over the first color with the second color to kind of blend out the join between the two, and this just helps you blend each color into the next to create a nice transition and a nicely blended panel in the end. So you can see I did the big reveal there, removing the mask. I love doing that part. Once you kind of pull it off, it kind of makes everything kind of work well together, and you can see the card coming to life. The next thing I did was I grabbed some scattered straw and some fossilized amber, and I kind of just added it to the circle there, which is our moon. So the fossilized amber kind of created the shadows, and the scattered straw kind of filled in the rest of the moon. Okay, so now we've got our night sky. It's time to make it look a bit spooky, and I like to add hazy clouds around the moon. So I'm using some Hero Arts Unicorn White Pigment ink, and I've got a little finger dauber here, and I'm just kind of taking the ink and kind of creating horizontally linear clouds along the panel. I want to do them in front of the moon, off to the side, and a bit in the sky just to make it a complete night sky scene. You get the full moon, the hazy clouds, and then in the end, you're going to have your wolf kind of howling into the moon, which I think is a pretty iconic look for a Halloween card. So once I feel like I've got those clouds kind of in there, and keep in mind as the pigment ink dries, it's going to kind of blend with a bit of the background, and that's what creates the hazy cloud. Because keep in mind, these are oxide inks which have a pigment nature to them, even though they're not completely pigment, so that's why it kind of blends well with it. So now I've gone ahead and I've cut out the wolf from some black cardstock. And now I'm going to create my mound. So basically the big mound that my wolf is going to stand upon, so that it's actually right kind of in the bottom center of that moon that we created. So all I'm doing is simply cutting out, just in a weird angled fashion, a piece of black cardstock. And I kind of did measure it a bit to make sure that, it's going to cover the portion I want and kind of come up to a point at the bottom of the moon. It is a little bit larger, and I did that on purpose because I can always cut off extra, but once I've cut out a mound, if it's not the right height, then I've got to cut out a new one, right? So this works best. So you can see I kind of place it on there where I want it to be. I put the wolf on top to make sure he's going to sit where I want him, and now I've just cut off all the excess pieces. So I've got this exactly how I want it. Now I've got my Pigma Micron markers. They're all black, they're different sizes, and I'm just going to use them to create a bit of detail in the background. So I didn't want it to just be a plain mound of ground. I wanted to add some shrubbery, maybe some trees. So all I'm doing is I'm just kind of grabbing the bigger marker and I'm just dabbing it around in the shape of a tree or shrubbery to get the look of foliage like kind of down on the ground. And then I'm grabbing my thinner tip marker to just kind of I'm just kind of wafting it or swiping it upwards very quickly to create the little strands of grass sticking up from the mound of ground. So I'll just continue in this fashion till I've created all those little detailed shrubbery pieces and grass. And you can see that it really doesn't take any artistic skill at all. Anyone could basically do this. All I'm doing is using little dotted or stippling type of movements with my marker and then straight flicks up for the grass. So nothing too complicated here. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my die cut, the little wolf, and I think it's important to do this part. I'm grabbing some more of that pigment ink and just kind of brushing it along the edges. Now this creates the highlight on the wolf. So remember he's in front of that big glowing moon, so it's going to shine off of its fur. So you need that bit of glisten on the edges just to give it a really more of a eerie type look, and just it looks a bit more realistic. Now, I kind of missed some footage here. Sorry about that. I am taking a white Jelly Roll pen, size 8, and I'm just creating little stars. So all I did was create crosses and then add a few dots around it to create the stars in the background and the sky. And now I'm moving on to stamping the sentiment on that black mound of ground. So all I did was grab the Happy Halloween sentiment from the Witch's Brew stamp set. And I'm stamping it out with some Versamark ink, and I'm going to heat emboss it with some Hero Arts white embossing powder. So as you can see, the white powder works perfect on this because it's on the black. It's going to stand out nicely, and I have a lot of black in the bottom there, so it really highlights the sentiment. So once that I've got that all dried up or heated up there, I can go ahead and attach this panel to my card base. So again, my card base is going to match the card panel, so it's exactly an A2 sized card base, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I will just attach that by lining it up and adhering it. So once I've got this attached, you can see it looks pretty nice as is, but I really can't stop there. As usual, I have to add some embellishments. So I've got some of my clear gems, and I'm using more of the smaller sizes in the background here, and I'm just adding a few here or there because I do have the starry sky, so I thought adding a little bit of shine with the gems would work really well. And I'm trying my best not to add too much because I have enough detail on this card as it is. This is just for a little bit of extra punch or pizzazz. And that's that final card there. So let's go ahead and move on to the 2 other cards because I have 2 other renditions of this technique using 2 other animals from the Halloween animal set. So I'm just going to grab the ones that I need. I've got the owl and the cat. And the cool thing about the owl is you can kind of layer it. So I've got one piece here for the breast of the owl. So I've cut that out and the main owl. So I've got 2 pieces here that I can layer together and give it more of a dimensional look as I put it on my card. Then I've got the cat, which I've also cut out of black. And then I've also got this die that has different shaped eyes. Now I like the idea of this because I can actually pull out those little die cut eyes and add them to the owl and the cat. And I think there's maybe, I'm not sure, there might be some other animals in the set that you can use these different colored eyes on. And it just works perfectly, especially because this is a silhouette card that I'm making, so everything is black, and when I add these yellow eyes, it's really going to stand out and just make this Halloween animal that much more dramatic. So you can see once I put those eyes on the owl, it looks really cool and kind of creepy, which is what you want for Halloween cards. Now, I did notice that it's missing the pupil, so I just kind of filled those in with my black marker here. And I made sure they're kind of equal as much as I could. So that owl is pretty much done. And you can see I added that breast piece using a piece of foam, like a foam square. So that's what gave it that dimension and that extra little bit of a layer. And then I'm going to do the same thing here with the cat. I'm taking the next row of eyes, which I cut out of white cardstock, and I'm just attaching that to the cat, and you can see it fits perfectly in the little embossed bits there for the cat. And same with the owl, I added the pupils with the marker. So now for this card, I'm kind of figuring out where I want my moon, and instead of having it in the center, I placed it off to the right a little bit, and there is a reason for this because I am going to add the tree to the left, so I had to leave a bit of space there. Now for this card, I'm adding a bunch of purples and blacks. So I've got Seedless Preserves, then I'm using Wilted Violet, then Villainous Potion, and then again I'll finish it off with black soot around the edges to kind of just darken up the panel and make it look more like a night sky. However, the main difference with this card is that you'll notice on the first one, I kind of layered those inks horizontally going up and down the panel. Now for this one, I'm actually making the inks change colors or transition as we go outwards in a circular motion outwards from that circle mask, which will be the moon. So I do want to mention that these cards do involve a lot of ink blending, and if you're not that great at ink blending, and it has taken me some time to get better at it too, I do recommend using oxide inks versus the distress dye inks. It's harder to blend the colors with dye inks, and with the oxide inks, because it has that pigment nature to it, it just blends so much nicer, and it's much easier to work with if you're just learning the technique. I would have to say that the key to getting a nicely blended panel is going back with your first color. So I'll add my first color, I'll add my second color, and then I'll go back with the first to blend over that join. And sometimes I'll go back again with the second color as much as possible to blend the line between where the two colors meet. And that's where the most important, or where you have to pay the most attention, because that's what's going to give you the best blend. So the more time you take to make sure you blend better, the better your panel is going to look. Okay, so again, I missed the reveal, but I went ahead and revealed the center, which was the circle there, and then I added the scattered straw and the fossilized amber just like the first card. Now for my final card, as I said, I'm using a larger circle. So this is a size up from the other circle we used, and I'm placing it a little bit off the card on the left edge. And the reason for this is because, one, the circle is larger. I wanted it to have a bit of a different look, and I wanted the cat to be kind of off to the side. So I just wanted different looks for each card. The first card, we had the animal in the center. The second card, we had the owl off to the right. And this time we have the little cat off to the left. So I'm using the same technique here as I did for the last one. So I'm blending outwards from the center of that mask. And I'm starting with Twisted Citron. And then I'm coming in with some pine needles. Then I will add some chipped sapphire. And then finally black soot. And again, the black soot is going to be placed all around the edges to kind of darken the panel and make it look more like a night sky. And you can see that, these are my 3 different versions of this, but you could move your moon wherever you want. That changes how your card looks. You can use a different combination of colors that changes how your card looks. If you want and you feel better or more comfortable with ink blending, you go ahead and use some dye inks and see how it looks with those. I'm pretty sure you'll get a more vibrant sky, because remember, with the oxides, you've got a bit of an opaque nature to it, so it's not as vibrant and deep in color. I'm guessing you could even try doing this with some alcohol inks, maybe on some Yupo. I don't know. You could get a ton of different looks with this idea. So again, I've unmasked the center here, which is a nice bright large moon, and I'm adding the fossilized amber. Again, this is, you can see I'm just haphazardly adding the fossilized amber to create shadows, kind of like you'd see in the moon, to kind of give it that cheesy look with like bits of it gouged out. And then I added the scatter straw again to just even everything out. So with these two panels, instead of just drawing on stars like I did on the first one, I decided just to sprinkle it with some water. So all I did was take some water from my spray bottle, put it in my hand, flick it onto the panel, and then I grabbed a dry towel and then just kind of patted it on top to lift up off the droplets, and that created that beautiful distress effect on here to create the starry sky. Now, again, I'm coming in with the white pigment ink to create the hazy clouds in front of the moon. And I'm using the exact same technique as before. And this is where you can have fun with it. You can maybe create a lot of haze at the bottom. You don't have to add the clouds if you don't want to. It's completely up to you. So I went ahead and I did this, and I will mention that when you do this, be careful because you're adding that pigment ink on top of your panel, and if your panel is not completely or 100% dry, it's going to pick up some of the ink underneath. Now remember, what I like to say is something I learned in science class, which is likes dissolve likes. So you have a pigment component to your oxide inks, you have pigment ink in the white pigment ink. The two are going to kind of mix together a bit as you use them. So you might want to kind of wipe off your dauber a bit when you go to put it onto your white ink pad again, because it will get contaminated. So now for the panel with the owl, you can see I've kind of just placed my owl on there to see where I'm going to put it. And now again, I'm using my Pigma Micron markers to actually draw in that tree. And I really just did this all freehand. It doesn't really take too much. If you want, what I found that helped me is I looked up a picture of a tree or like a spooky background with a tree. So I kind of just eyeballed it and kind of drew it the same way. I added a bit of branches, extra branches, and the leaves and stuff here and there. But to get the main outline of the tree, sometimes I kind of have to look at something to kind of mimic it on my panel. So I just kind of looked up a picture on my phone, and that's what I was doing. And also, as I was filling in the tree to kind of create the silhouette, I tried to follow the grain of a tree, like up and down, and then I kind of drew the circle in the center where there might be like a circular grain on the wood. So I went ahead and tried to incorporate that just in case when you actually see the card with the naked eye, you can see some of the marks from the marker. Now, if you actually look at the shrubbery of the tree or the leaves of the tree, it doesn't look too realistic, right? Because I kind of made it work for my card. I figured the branches kind of looked the most realistic, and the focal point's going to be the owl anyways. But I did make sure that when I drew those leaves in, it did kind of surround the moon. And I did this on purpose because, as I said, you want to keep that moon as your focal point. So by darkening the edges and adding the leaves in this fashion, it really just makes your eye be drawn more towards the moon versus the edges of the card. So for the final card with the cat, I actually did the exact same thing that I did for the first card. Is I cut out a mound of ground, which it seems to be my word of the day, and I placed it on or adhered it to the panel so that my cat would sit exactly where I wanted it in front of the moon. And now again, I'm grabbing my micron markers and I'm drawing in some more shrubbery. And I think I kind of filled in a bit of the ground to the right side because my mound was a little bit small, which you could also do as well. You don't actually have to cut a black piece of cardstock if you don't have it, or you don't feel like it. You could just color it in with your black marker if you really want to. So again, for this mound, I just added a bunch of grass rather than too much shrubbery. And now I'll go ahead and add the sentiments to both of the cards. So for the card with the owl, I've got a larger sentiment from the Witch's Brew stamp set, and I'm just stamping this out with some VersaFine clear embossing ink. And again, I am adding some Hero Arts white embossing powder to it. Now, because our background is pretty much, it's dark colors, the white shows up nicely on it. I got a bit of extra stray embossing powder, which I kind of just flicked off with a dry paintbrush, and then I heated it up to melt that embossing powder. And keep in mind that you do have to add the anti-static tool, powder tool, in order to make sure you don't get too many strays, because you added so much ink to that panel. If it's not 100% dry, you're going to get a lot of stray embossing. Now for the panel with the cat, I just simply stamped another sentiment from that same Witch's Brew stamp set, and I just stamped it with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink in the moon. So that was partly why I made the moon bigger, because I did want to stamp the sentiment in it to give it a bit of a different look. Now I'll go ahead and add my owl to the panel with the tree. And you can see I added some more foam squares to it to give it more dimension. And I did forget to add the pigment ink before I attached it. So I went ahead and just attached it. I added the pigment ink slightly on the edges after it was attached to the card. So if you do forget to do that, don't worry. You can still add it after you've attached it to your card. And again, I also added that pigment ink to the cat, and I added some more embellishments, just like I did to the first card, to the second, and I'll go ahead and complete those steps with the final card as well. So I'm attaching that cat where I want it, in front of the moon. And again, I'll go ahead and add some more of these clear gems to the sky, just to create some more twinkle and stars on, like I did on the other two cards. So those are my cards for today. I hope that you've been inspired to create something similar yourself, and you can see that those Halloween animal dies really come in handy for those silhouette cards. They work out really nicely. The ink blended backgrounds work out perfectly with this technique. And those are my cards for today. So I hope that you guys like my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And all of the products that I've used today are listed in my blog, which is linked in the description below. Don't forget to check that out and check out the Scrappy Tales shop. I hope to see you guys next time, and have a great day. Bye.